Hello, welcome back. My name is Yenja, and I'm a memory champion, expert, coach, and consultant.
Yenja Wintersoul is a grandmaster of memory.
But you probably already knew that if you're subscribed, so if you're not, please subscribe to see more of these videos and help me pay my bills. So today I want you to have some quick tips for how to be better able to recognize faces. And as somebody who's broken the world record for remembering names and faces twice, the latest being 212 international names and faces in 15 minutes. This is kind of my area of expertise, or one of them at least. And I know that most people struggle more with remembering names. I've already done a couple of videos on that, but some people struggle a lot with recognizing a face. So how are you going to connect a name with a face if you don't even recognize the face? The truth is that recognition is always easier than recall. Being able to recognize something as something you've seen previously is always going to be easier than being able to recall and reconstruct in your mind what somebody's name is or what somebody looks like. But how can you improve recognition, especially facial recognition? Now, why is it that we are able to recognize faces in the first place? It is an evolutionary need for us to be able to recognize faces because we used to live in small tribes of maybe 100 or 150 people, and basically it would be very hard to survive if you didn't recognize the people in your own tribe. So facial recognition is innate, not just to Face ID technology, but also to humans in general. But nowadays we have thousands and thousands of not only faces within our work environments maybe, or our schools, but also all these celebrities and public figures. And so it gets kind of hard to keep track of. So how do we improve our ability to recognize faces? The first tip is that you need to see if you have a particular blind spot. You need to see where you are and where you can improve from that. So a lot of people say that it's rude if you think that people from a certain age group or ethnicity or gender all look the same. Well, the truth is that it is a lot about survival, but also about the environment you grew up in. If you are an Asian kid who grew up in a Latino environment, your ability to be able to distinguish and tell and recognize Latinx faces apart will be way higher than your ability to tell Asian people apart. Nobody's perfect, so usually everybody has some type of demographic, some type of group that they have a harder time recognizing faces from. It varies from person to person, and there are lots of reasons why we're more or less inclined to remember or recognize people from different groups. If you recognize a certain blind spot, let's say it's men ages 25 to 35 look very similar to you. But the way to mitigate that, if you do know that you have this blind spot, is to consume media where they are heavily featured. And this sounds like it is really a strange activity, but it usually works. Some people, for example, have said that they have a really hard time telling, let's say, Asian people apart, but then they start watching a K-drama and suddenly they have a much easier time being able to tell who's who. And it helps with their general ability to recognize Asian faces. And your brain starts to be better able to distinguish different facial features and see more of a nuanced picture. When you're not used to something, no matter what it is, you have a tendency to view it as very generic and unnuanced, but then once you start getting into it and you start learning more about it, that's when your brain is better able to create different nuances and see various differences. In general, another way to be better able to recognize a face, you also want to attach some type of emotional need to it. If somebody punches you in the face, you're very likely to be able to recognize that face in the future in case you see that person again and you know that that person is dangerous. If somebody does you a favor, you want to remember them because you have an emotional need to maybe return that favor in the future. So in the same way, sometimes when we shake hands with somebody, there is not any immediate emotional connection or emotional need, but you can kind of artificially create one and think, I wonder what this person does in their spare time, or I wonder if we could be friends. And you just attach a little bit of a story to it that brings you maybe closer to 4 or 8 times more likely to remember them than if you were to just try to recognize their face with no emotional attachment. Another way to get better at recognizing faces is to actually pay attention when you're talking to somebody. And now this sounds very easy, but it's quite hard, especially for those of us who might be more shy or have a tendency to not look people in the eye when we're talking to them. And for those of you in that group, I suggest really looking at the person, really listening when they're speaking, and you will notice way more things about them and their facial features than you were able to before. And after you've had an interaction and you've met for the first time, for example, you can try to see if you can reconstruct their face in your mind's eye. And just the act of trying to reconstruct something in your mind helps you better able to recognize it the next time. The last piece of advice, which is kind of meta advice, is something that I learned from certain students who are also art students. You want to try to recreate people's facial features by drawing them. Now, I know if you feel like, oh my God, I don't know how to draw, it sounds like a very hard task, but just choosing a facial feature to focus on and drawing it, and honestly, everybody can learn how to draw, I promise you. There are so many tutorials on this very platform. Everybody can do it. Maybe not excellently, but just the effort will help you better be able to recognize different facial features and distinguish them and notice them in other people. So a lot of the art students I've talked to, they have a tendency to become really good at recognizing different types of noses when they're drawing only noses for a certain period, or really good at recognizing eyes and different eye shapes and eye colors and eyelid shapes and everything like that, because they spend a certain amount of time in their drawing classes learning how to draw only eyes. And again, it might be that when you're not familiar with it, it's just a nose is a nose, but then the more you start getting into it and start getting into the details of it, there are various different types of noses you'll discover. So I hope this has been helpful, and I hope you find it useful and that you've learned something today. And I'm so happy and so grateful you watched until the end of this video. That is a testament to how good of an attention span you have, which is helpful for memory. So talk to me in the comments if you have questions or actual comments, and I'll see you next week. Bye.